Trappings and Trinkets Knitting Podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole. So I am standing here today because I have a lot to show you, and rather than having everything in a big heap, I thought I would hang it up behind me. Let me just readjust there. Okay, so I've been hacking t-shirts for this past week or two, and I have a bunch that have turned out well, and so I thought I would show you what I've been up to. So I'll start with the simplest thing that I've done. None of these have a high neck anymore, but all of these shirts started out as like crew neck t-shirts that just have a very small neck at the top, a very typical, like this is what most t-shirts look like think band t-shirts or your Hanes t-shirts, that kind of thing. So I'm not in love with that. I don't like to feel like I'm stretching a shirt over my head. So I like to turn them into scoop necks. So what I did is I cut the necks off of all of these. And the way I do that is I fold the t-shirt in half this way. Like I bring the shoulder seams together to locate the front center. And I do a straight cut into the center. And, you know, I go down a couple inches. Yeah, I try the t-shirt on first just to like kind of eyeball how many inches I need to go down. So I cut it down in a straight line, and then I cut a curve over to the shoulder seam. And that's my first cut. Then I take that piece off, I flip it in reverse on top of this side that is still there, and I use that as my template to finish cutting the front. So that gives me an even neckline all the way around. And then I do the same thing in the back. So you can see this goes down a little bit. I don't go straight down in the center very much in the back. I might only go down an inch or an inch and a half, but then I do a curve over to the shoulder seam, flip that upside down, place it on the other side, and then I do the rest of the half circle. So that's how I cut my neck off. The next thing that I do is I cut a strip of knit t-shirty fabric. I like to cut it about 2.5 or so inches wide, and depending on how large my neck is all the way around, I might cut it 20, I would say somewhere between 20 and 26 inches or so, because you want it to be able to go all the way around, and you also need enough that you can fold. I shouldn't have used black here. It's kind of hard to see what I'm doing. But on one end, you need to fold it so that there's no raw edge in the back where the two pieces are going to meet. So if you want to be fancy, you actually, and this is how a sewing pattern would tell you to do it. I can show you on this shirt that I just made. So you see how this, yikes. You can see on this is the center of the back neckline. You can see that there's just a small seam there, and it's not real obvious, not real noticeable. And even on the inside, again, not real obvious and noticeable. So that's how a professionally seamed neckline is done. And it certainly does look a little bit nicer than the way I do it. Let me show you how I do it, or how it looks when I do it. So here it is in the back. So it is definitely more noticeable. And here it is on the inside, which obviously nobody sees that, but it's more noticeable. But I mean, you know, from a couple feet away, I'm not sure that that is so noticeable that I need to do the extra hassle to get the nice finish. And also I have hair that kind of covers the back of my neckline, so I don't really worry too much about what it looks like. But anyway, I'll tell you how to do both ways. So if you are fancy and you want to do it the super professional way, step one after you cut, well, actually, step one is that you have to cut exactly the right length of knit fabric. So here's how you do it. You have to measure your neckline all the way around. So get out your flexible tape measure, and you have to know exactly what the measurement of that whole circle is. And then you're going to multiply it by about 80%. And then you're going to add your seam allowance. So I like to work with about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I would add an inch, because a 1/2 inch for each side. So let's pretend, we'll make the numbers easy. Let's pretend that this neckline is 20 inches. I'm sure it's way more than 20 inches, but let's just pretend. So 20 inches and 80% of 20 inches would be 16 inches. So I'm going to cut a strip of fabric that is about 16 inches long and about 2.5 inches wide. And this, like the width here really depends on how wide you want this neckline to be. See, I like to make them about 1/2 inch. I don't like them to be real big because they do get a little ruffly and out of control if they are too wide, just because this knit fabric, it's not ribbed. It doesn't have a lot of like stretching in on itself to do. So I wouldn't recommend going more than about 3/4 of an inch maybe. I haven't tried one that's more than that, so if you want to experiment, go ahead. Tell me how it works. But from what I've experienced, I know that 1/2 inch or so works really well. So I cut it 2.5 inches wide because that not only gives me the 1/2 inch on either side, but it gives me quite a bit of grace to work with as far as the finishing step. So I would just recommend, like, if you want 1/2 inch, multiply that by 3 and then give yourself an extra inch. So that's how I come up with 2.5 inches. Okay, so you cut your 16-inch long strip of fabric. And the next thing you're going to do is turn it into a circle. So you're going to put the ends together, you're going to sew a seam here, and then you're going to have a circle, right? Okay, the next step is, once you have your circle, and you're just going to have to imagine that this is in a circle, you're going to take your shirt with the raw neck edge, and you are going to pin this so that the right sides are together. So let's pretend this is the right side, since you can't really tell which one's the right side. So I'm going to put the right side touching the right side of this fabric, and I'm going to pin this. Now here's the thing. Your neckline is it's 20% bigger than your neckline trim. So as you pin this out, you're going to have to do some stretching. And actually the easiest way to pin it out would be to take that seam and pin the seam right to the center back. And then I would locate on the neckline where is the opposite end from. So if the seam is over here, if you fold it in half, you'll find the opposite end. And I would pin that in the middle of the front of your shirt. And that way, as you are pinning it out, you at least have 2 fixed points so that you kind of have an even amount of stretch all the way around. I hope that makes sense. So after you have the whole circle pinned around your shirt, you're going to sew, I like 1/2 inch, sew a 1/2 inch seam all the way around. At that point, you can take your pins out, and then, this will be a little tricky to demonstrate, but I think I can kind of show you how it's done. So let's pretend that we have this sewn here. So now you're going to take your fabric and you're going to flip it. So now you're looking at the right side here, and you're going to tuck it to the back of your piece. Okay, so you've got your neckline here. You've got the extra fabric on the back. You have to make sure that you pin it on the front of your piece, because you're definitely going to sew on the front of the piece. And that's why it's so important to have that extra fabric here, because since you're not looking at the back of the fabric as you're sewing it, sometimes it's easy to get a little off course. And so I really like to have that extra fabric so that I'm not accidentally not catching what I need to catch. So then after you have this pin like flipped over to the back, so you can see I've done it on this one, flip it over to the back, and then you're just going to sew a seam. I like to, actually, I've done it a few different ways. This one, yeah, I really like how this one turned out. So this one, I was using a double twin needle. Actually, it's just called a twin needle, not a double twin needle. So one of the needles was sewing right along the edge of the neckline, and then the second needle was sewing, whatever that is, 1/8 of an inch into the neckline all the way around, and it made a nice finished look. And I certainly didn't do it perfectly all the way around, but I did a pretty good job. So you can see how that looks. Let me find a shirt that I did a different way. Let's see. Oh, this one, I just used a single needle on this one, and I used the stretch stitch on my machine, and I just sewed right into the ditch here. all the way around. So that one did not make a noticeable stitch. It just kind of got hidden in the neckline. So that's fine. That works for me. It's hard to see everything on these black shirts. This gray one, yeah, this one I sewed like I was drunk. You can see in some places I did a good job of sewing. Like over here I sewed into the ditch and below it, and then here I was kind of on top of it, but also way below. So I'm not really sure. I think this was the first one I did. So this was my experiment. But it's fine. I mean, honestly, like, who's going to get so close that they're going to notice it? This is like a foot away from the camera, and it looks fine. So, anyway, so you have a couple options when you're doing knit fabric. Let's talk for a second about some tools you might need if you are using, if you're knitting with knit fabric, which is like t-shirt type fabric. So this is what a twin needle looks like. It's just, let's see if I can get it to focus on that. Hey, how about that? No? I don't know, send in focus. So you can see that the twin needle has two needles coming off of one prong. And this is what you use to make this sort of stitching where there's, you know, two lines running parallel. And the trick is, the thing that makes this good for knit fabric is the back of it. So let me show you what the back of this looks like. So it's a zigzag on the back. So there's the front with the two lines. And then the back of this fabric has the zigzag. And the zigzag is what allows this to be a very stretchy stitch. So even though this neckline is quite large enough for my head, if I were to pull on it more than I needed to, the stitches here will not break because it has that zigzag on one side. So you need to either use a twin needle or you can use just the zigzag stitch on your machine. You know, it's going to give you a different type of finish on the front side too, though you're going to have a zigzag on both sides. Or the third choice is that you can use a single needle and use your machine might have something called a stretch stitch. And I actually did not know about this until Marcia from my knit night asked me, well, doesn't your machine have a stretch stitch? And I was like, I don't know. I had never heard about it. So the answer is yes, my machine does, and I don't have a fancy sewing machine. So I will insert a video here to show you how I found my stretch stitch, and maybe you'll recognize something similar on your own model, and then maybe you'll be amazed that you have it too.
So here is my machine. It's just a pretty basic Kenmore model, and I bought it like 20 years ago, so I swear it is nothing fancy. I think it cost me $100, $120 at the time. So anyway, if you take a look over here at my stretch option, or at my stitch options, this one right here is the stretch stitch. And I only knew that because I looked up the manual online. If your sewing machine is anything like mine, it has the model number back here on a sticker. So let's see, my model number is, I know it, it's in there somewhere. Oh, here we go. 385-1652-4000. So my model number is right here. So if you can figure out what brand and model number your machine is, you will also be able to go look it up on the internet and get your manual. Unless you're a responsible adult who keeps their manuals, which I am not. So anyway, back to the stitches here. So this one, the number 1 little brown stitch here, that's the symbol on the Kenmore for a stretch stitch. So that is what I had to figure out how to load up here. So what I have to do is just move my stitch selector to the A stitches, because that's the first column here. And then for the length dial, I have to go all the way to one side, and it actually kind of sticks a little bit before I get to the SS. So the SS stands for a stretch stitch. So that's how I set the length. And then on the width, the manual told me that I just want to set it to the the 6.5 because that's the largest width that this machine offers. So once I have these two dials to SS and 6.5, and once this dial is over here to the A stitches, then I'm ready to sew. All right, let's see if I can give you a little demonstration of what the stretch stitch looks like. If I can film and sew at the same time. So as you can see, it kind of goes back and forth. Like one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back. And it's probably not going very straight because I have one hand busy here on the camera. But anyway, we'll do some of that, and then take a look at what that stretch stitch looks like. So you can see that it almost looks like a straight line of stitches. They're just a little bit offset, and it's kind of the same front and back. So this is a very good substitute for just your plain stitch, but you can see it also stretches with the fabric. It's a lot stretchier than just your regular plain stitch. All right, so anyway, it's a good substitute for a straight stitch if you are using knit fabric and you don't want to use a twin needle and you don't want the visual of the zigzag stitch.
So the zigzag and the stretch stitch are two options for someone who does not want to use the twin needle, or just buy a twin needle. The needle itself, this is like $5 at Joann's, or lots of quilting type stores would have it. You also, if you're using the twin needle, you need 2 pegs to put your top thread on. So most machines only have 1 peg to put your thread spool on. So you'll need to get one of these, and this is just an extra thread spool holder. I got mine off of Amazon. It was like $12 or something like that. So you put the thread on the peg, it threads through here, and then you place this to the back right of your sewing machine, and then you bring this thread through the top, or over the top, I guess, along with the thread that's already mounted on your machine, and you thread them both through the machine together. And then once you get to the needle, you'll obviously put 1 thread into the right needle and 1 thread into the left needle. Okay, so those are the only tools you need. So it's like $20 to get your thread holder and your twin needle, and then you're all set to sew with knit fabrics. One more thing about the needle, when you are sewing knit fabrics, you're supposed to use I believe they're called ballpoint needles, or I've also seen jersey needles. So those needles are not quite as sharp as needles that you would use for more structured woven fabrics. And so I guess it's just so that it doesn't, like it will work itself through the holes that already exist in the fabric rather than piercing new holes. So there you go. Now, the shirts that I used my straight needle on, a couple of them I didn't have a ballpoint needle yet, so I just did it with a regular one, and so far it's fine. I don't know if that means it's more likely to like develop holes in the laundry. If I'm piercing the fabric, maybe that weakens it. So I don't know. I can't say for sure whether or not it's a terrible idea, but I know that they do recommend using those duller needles on knit fabrics. Okay, so anyway, there's the toys that you want to get if you're going to work with knit fabrics. So I've already explained the fancy neckline that I used for the teal shirt over there. Now here's how I do the quick and dirty version that I don't worry so much if the back isn't 100% perfect. So I am still going to cut my strip of t-shirty, like thinnish knit fabric. And by the way, I just bought this at Joann's. But instead of having to measure and like be very precise about my stretch, I basically just cut it around the same length as the neckline, and then I start it by folding one side over, so that would be, I'm folding my 2 wrong sides together, and then I go to the back middle and I pin this so that the right sides are together. Okay, so I've got a fold here, and I'm going to pin it like so. Okay, so this, you're looking at the wrong side of this, and this is the right side, and underneath here, that's also the right side. Okay, so I've got the fold there. And that fold is what's gonna put a finished edge on the outside here once you're done, instead of like a edge that's gonna fray. So I just put one pin in it, and then I go sit down at my machine. So this thing is just flapping in the wind. So once I sit down at my machine and put this under my needle, I'm just stretching this just a little bit, not a ton. Remember, you're looking for about 20% stretch as you're sewing this together. So I would just have this sitting flat on my machine, and I would just do it slowly, keep it lined up, stretch it a little bit. Don't stretch the t-shirt underneath, just stretch the neckline fabric. Aim for about 20% stretch, and you'll know, it'll be real obvious once you've sewn it, if you've sewn it with too much stretch, because instead of laying flat and nice like this, the shirt will be all like puckery. It'll be like that. It'll just kind of look crumply around the neckline because you're forcing the shirt to stretch too much to meet the neckline. So hopefully you'll be able, I mean, if it looks weird and full of contracted fabric, you'll know something's wrong. So the chances are, probably what's wrong is that you stretch the neckline too much. If you don't stretch it enough, what's going to happen is that this is going to be kind of floppy and it's going to stick out instead of curving inward. So you want this one actually, like, it's fine, but if it's definitely not stretched too much. If anything, this neckline could use a little bit more stretch. I think I did a really good job on this one. This looks really good to me. So anyway, make sure you stretch that neckline fabric as you do it, or as you stitch it. And then, just like with the fancy neckline, once you're done with that initial stitching all the way around, you just take this fabric. So this fabric is now stitched here. You're going to take it, fold it, and then tuck it to the back, so that now you have a nice neckline on the outside and you have some extra fabric in the back, and then you stitch right along here. Ta-da, that's it. So necklines are actually really easy to do. If you ever wanted to finish off a sleeve in a way that is going to pull it in just a little bit, you would do it the same way. Obviously, like t-shirt sleeves, you don't want to pull in generally. And so with this, you would not stretch the fabric as you sewed it. Like, honestly, for t-shirt sleeves, I would just take it, tuck it under, and then stitch all the way around. So you wouldn't really have to cut an extra contrast band. But if you wanted an extra contrast band like this, for this t-shirt, I only bought gray and black for my knit fabric from Joann. So this gray was too light to go with this shirt, so I just decided to do a black neckband on that one. So actually this shirt would look really cute with a contrasting band on the sleeves. So if I chose to do that, I would not stretch the contrast band as I stitch it on. I would just cut it the exact same distance around plus a seam allowance, and I would just let it be exactly the same length or, you know, distanced around as the sleeve itself. So that would make it hang normal like a t-shirt sleeve would. The other hack that I did on a couple of these t-shirts is some ruching. So that is any sort of technique that kind of sews wrinkles into your clothes. So I like it because I feel like when I get store-bought t-shirts, the store-bought t-shirts that are more unisex shaped, I feel like they are generally very long for my torso, and I don't like to buy real big baggy t-shirts. So what ends up happening is that they feel very sausagey because they're kind of long, right? So they're long, and also they're kind of fitted. So like this, I don't know, I feel like this is not a good look for me. So what I do like is when they have a little bit of gathering here. And so you can see here that on the outside, it just kind of looks like a little seam, and maybe you can't even really see it very well. It's actually, the stitching here is right next to the side seam, so it kind of blends in there. And certainly, like, when all the wrinkles are around it, you don't really see exactly what's going on as far as stitching here. But all it is on the back side is a piece of elastic. That's all you have to do. You do a straight seam with elastic. I will show you on this. So on this shirt, I did it on both sides. So I ruched both side seams, and that kind of makes it gather, and it just kind of stays put on my hips rather than the shirt like going way down past my butt. So let's see on this shirt. On this one, I only did it on one side, and sorry, it's black again, so I know it's hard to see. So this side I left this side plain, and on this side I did the ruching, and I didn't place this one right on the side seam, which is over here. For this one, I went in, like into the body about 5 inches. So I kind of placed it right over one leg. Okay, so let's look at the back. So what we have here is a piece of elastic, and I pinned it at the hem. So that was my first pin. And then I measured, I believe it was like 8 inches or 8.5 inches down the shirt, because see, it looks small, but when you stretch the elastic, it's actually about 8 inches. So I put my second pin on the elastic about 8 inches up the shirt. And so obviously, once I did that, the t-shirt underneath the elastic was all scrunched up because the t-shirt was longer than the, oh, did I say that this elastic's like 5 inches or 5.5 inches? So the t-shirt is longer than the elastic that I used. So when you sew it, you have to gently stretch the elastic, not overstretch it, but just kind of stretch it so it's exactly the same length as the t-shirt beneath it. So my little 5-inch thing of elastic had to stretch to about 8 inches, and then you just sew a straight stitch. So it does take 2 hands to hold this underneath your machine, because you can't stretch it while it's going through the needle because you'll pull it out of the sewing machine, basically. So you need one hand on the, like right behind the feed dogs to hold the elastic and the fabric in place. And then your other hand is on the front of the machine stretching as you sew. So it's just, my machine was being a jerk that day. So sorry, my seam looks terrible there. But black t-shirt, who cares? Nobody will ever know. So that's what it looks like. And then for this one, I added a little tie here because it kind of makes it look like the ruching was somehow done by this tie, as if I like bunched it up and then tied it. The tie is just fake. It has nothing to do with the ruching above it, but here's how I made the tie. Here, let me adjust since I'm done showing you my hips. Okay, so let's use this strip as an example again. It's bigger than the one I cut to make the tie. I believe that the tie, so I put a post about this on my Trappings and Trinkets blog. It's just www.trappingsandtrinkets.com. And I wrote that on May 2nd. So if you want all the exact measurements, I did put them on that blog because I wrote that right after I hacked this t-shirt. So anyway, it was like 1 inch or 1.5 inches wide strip of fabric, and maybe 20 inches or so, because you just want enough that you can tie it into a bow like so. So this would be a little bit short, and this is probably 15 inches long. So let's say 20 inches by about 1 inch or 1.5 inches. You're going to fold it into thirds. So think like a brochure, like a little pamphlet. And then you're just going to sew right down next to the raw edge. So I know you're like, what? There's a raw edge? Yeah, knit fabrics, they just don't fray that much. So don't worry about it. Just stitch a little line. And just as you put it through your machine, just keep folding it into thirds. Remember, when you fold into thirds, you do one side over and then the other side over. Anyway, you're going to get this whole thing folded into a skinny little thing that is 1/3 the width of what you started with. And then, like I just said, you're going to tie it in a bow like so. It's going to look a lot smaller than that. It's not going to be puffy anymore. And then you're going to take your two ends. Here, I'll untie it to show you. Don't untie it when you do this. The first step is tie it in a bow. Then you're going to take each of the ends, you're going to tie that into a knot, and then you're going to cut that extra fabric off. Make sure you pull this really tight because you don't want that knot to come undone. That will be a little bit tricky to get back in place if it does come undone. But this has been through the laundry a couple times since I made it, and the knots seem to be holding great. So just make sure you really pull on it, and then you cut the little ends. Can you see that? Okay, so cut the little ends, and then just put this right at the base of your little ruching seam. Oh, can you see it? I keep asking you, can you see it? Can you see it? I know that you're answering me. Okay, so put it on the base of your ruching seam and then just sew it right to the t-shirt. So I sewed it on in bow form. The other option is to sew, place the middle of your long strip that you just sewed on that seam and just sew it in the middle and then tie it into a bow. If you do that, it will come untied and then you'll have to retie it. So that's an option too if you want to have the option of leaving the strings just loose. But I don't want that option, so I just made a bow and sewed it on right there in bow form. So of all the t-shirts that I hacked here, and it looks like, did I do about 6 of them, 5 of them? Yeah, 5 of them. No, 6 because I'm wearing one. So this I think is probably my favorite, and that's just because I have been wearing this shirt as a just chopped off neckline for at least 3 years now. My kids' marching band had a, like, we're cleaning out the archives sale at one of the parent nights a few years back. And I think I bought this shirt for like $3. So it's like out of the 1982 t-shirt sale archives. And so I liked it just because it was kind of a simple logo. It doesn't scream like marching band, but it's still something that I can wear when I go to their events at the high school, because I did not attend high school in the town I live in, so I don't have any gear for that high school. So this is my high school gear. So because the shirt was very much of the 80s, it really looked like an 80s shirt. So it had the very high crew neck, and then the thing that really made it an 80s shirt is that the long sleeves had the knit band that was kind of, oh, it's like this. So, so see how this has a knit band that, makes the sleeve kind of look puffy, and then this really grips your wrist. So that is how this stylish shirt was finished off. So it definitely looked a little bit dated. So I have been wearing this with the cut neckline, but I cut it a little bit too wide when I did it. And so I've always had to wear a tank top under it. Otherwise it was like bra hanging out sort of thing. And when you're a mom at the marching band events, your teenagers don't want to see your bra. So I had to keep it under wraps. So I'm glad to have put this neckline on it because I think that will be enough to kind of keep the neckline up far enough that my bra won't be hanging out. But I also thought, well, I should use this opportunity to finish off the sleeves in a slightly more modern way. So I cut off the puffy little cuff and I just turned the fabric under, and then I used my twin needle to make a nice seam to finish off that cuff. So I will now be a mom of the new millennium sporting my shirt at future band events. So hooray for that. So I think that those are all the t-shirt hacks that I've done. Shall we talk a little bit about the first shirt I showed you? This shirt was made from the Butterick 6173 pattern, and I made View D. So it's okay. I'm certainly not, like, I will certainly wear this shirt. I wasn't in love with it, and I'm not sure that it was completely my fault. So, a few things. So, number one, this pattern has more positive ease than you would want if you want your shirt to fit like this.
So this is a shirt that is, in the drawing, it looks like it is fitted in the yoke, so the top portion, and then it has an A-line where it gracefully goes out to the sides. The hem in the back is lower than the hem in front. So it's just kind of a nice, kind of fitted, but also billowy around the stomach area, A-line shirt. So that is not quite what it turns out to be. So on the hanger, this may look fairly billowy. Yeah, it does definitely, it has an A-line. It's not fitted, but it does not gracefully A-line out. It's kind of a weird combination of like tighter at the sides and a little bit looser in the front and back. So, I don't know. You see what I mean about like, it just kind of looks straight, and the curve to the back is a little bit awkward. Anyway, there's a possibility that using a thinner fabric would have made for a slightly more wispy fit. But this is a really lightweight knit fabric. So unless I'm talking about like chiffon or like something very, very thin, there's not much that I could do that is more thin and drapey than this thin knit fabric. So I don't know that it was not a great fabric choice. I think that this type of shirt should be able to work pretty well with a lightweight knit. The other thing that did happen with this shirt is that because there was so much positive ease, and I'm talking about the type of positive ease that would make, I should just put this on. What happened when I first pieced together this shirt is that these side seams, so you see how now they fit pretty well to my side. They are not, you know, flaring out like this. When I first pieced it together, the side seams were like this far out. And so all of this was very much multiple inches too big for my body. And it was unexpected because when I looked at the size chart on this, I was right between, so the sizes they list for the bust sizes, you got a 38-inch bust and a 40-inch bust, and I'm a 39. So I thought, well, it's knit fabric, it'll stretch. So I would rather have a shirt like this be a little bit too small in the top because it'll stretch just fine than too big and like straps falling off in that kind of situation. So I made the 38-inch size. So I certainly did not expect to have many inches of ease here on the sides. So, I mean, what this was not only was it out too far, but it also went down way too low. Like we're talking probably 3 inches deeper on the armhole than what it is finished off here. So I had to do a lot of, I actually put the shirt on inside out, and then I just kind of pulled the straps up so that the armhole was hitting me in the right place. And then I just put a pin there so I knew how much to, or where to sew the seam to get a good fit. And then I also had to pin the side seams, put a pin in here so I knew how much side needed to come off, and then I just tapered it. So I definitely cut off a couple inches on the top, but I only went down about 8 or 10 inches, and then I was tapering into the existing side seam. So when I say that it doesn't real gracefully, here, let me adjust a little bit, when it doesn't really gracefully hit me at the hips, I don't think that it has to do with me adjusting it, because down here at the bottom, there was no adjustment. So, like I said, I will definitely wear this shirt, and I'm not super disappointed in it, but it just wasn't 100%. It didn't turn out 100% of what I was kind of expecting that it would be. So, I would say this is like a B+ shirt. It's fine. I'm happy. Just a little caveats to watch for if you are thinking about making this one. It was a pretty easy top to put together, and I finished off the neckline like I described earlier, and then actually you finish off the sleeves in the exact same way. All right,
So let's talk about my other favorite thing that I made. And this one, seriously, like I am so happy with the way this turned out. Pattern. I'm happy to advertise this pattern. So McCall's pattern 9203. So I made this view right here. So that's view D right there. And I actually think I cut it shorter than what so this is like a floor length nightgown. If you leave it the length it is in the pattern, I'm looking down at my feet and I think it hits me about 3 or 4 inches above my ankles. So this is definitely like, I wanted this to be a winter warm nightgown, but not too warm to wear to bed. Like my husband one time got me this fleece nightgown, and it was fleece. So it was like a nice kind of robe type but it zipped up. It kind of looked like a nightgown. But anyway, I could wear it around the house in the winter and it would be nice and cozy. But if I tried to wear it to bed, I felt like I was boiling in hell. It was so hot. So I didn't want to pick fabric that was going to recreate that situation. So I did just pick a knit fabric, and I would call this medium weight. I actually don't have any exposed seams to show you. Oh, here's some. To show you the fabric, but I can show you on some scraps. So here's the thickness of that. Can you tell a difference if I put it next? Well, this has been stretched a million times, so this probably looks terrible now. So here's that one, and then here's this one. So they're pretty close. I don't know. You probably can't see anything there. All right, so there's the two fabrics. The gray is slightly thicker than the black, and it makes such a nice nightgown. I'm going to love this next winter. Of course, I finished this like the day that the weather turned really nice here. So it's been like in the 70s since, and I don't think we've closed our windows. We've been sleeping with the windows open every night. So it certainly is not the sort of weather that you want to wear a full-on winter nightgown. But so I ended up making a nightgown because, number one, I have a couple of very specific nightgown requirements. And number two, oh my God, have you tried to shop for a grown-up woman's nightgown lately? You have two choices. You have silky, like tiny spaghetti strap, silky fabric. Like, I kind of think maybe if you're in menopause and you're having like hot flashes at night, like maybe that's who likes these nightgowns, or like people who still want to wear the sexy nightgown. Still, people who haven't been married for 20 years that still want to wear. Who am I kidding? I didn't wear that stuff when I was newlywed. But anyway, so you have the silky, tiny nightgown stuff, or you have the stuff that is like, it just screams like, I've given up. So apologies in advance. I'm not saying this to offend you, but it's just not my style to go for the nightgowns that have like, you know what I'm talking about. They're like, they have ribbons on the yoke and like that white eyelet fabric, little ruffles. Like, usually these nightgowns are plaid. Let's face it. The ladies of the world must be all in plaid at night. So they're just like, I don't know. I feel like women in the 80s had these nightgowns. So it is a style that I feel like is in the past, and I don't want anything to do with it. So I am not into either of those extremes. What I want in a nightgown is, number one, I want it to be comfortable. I don't want it to have buttons. I don't want it to have lace. I don't want it to have anything sewn onto it that is going to bulge or poke into me when I'm laying on it, because that's not comfortable. So all of that like faux fanciness that's really just makes me sad. Like, no, I'm not into that. Number two, I want it to be long sleeved, and I want the sleeves to be long enough for my apparent giant gorilla arms. So honestly, I don't think my arms are super out of proportion, but I do find that store-bought clothes, the sleeves are a little bit shorter than what I want. So with a nightgown, it's even more important to have long sleeves, because let's say you're in bed and you throw your arm up behind you or you stretch it out to the side. I don't want that sleeve to come halfway up my arm and then just stick there, because in the winter, it is cold in my house at night, so any exposed skin might get frostbite. It's not that cold, but seriously, like it bothers me to have one exposed patch of skin that's unexpected. And because I noticed that and it bothers me. So I not only want my sleeves to be long enough, but I actually love a snug cuff, because that helps that when I do move my arms around, the sleeve doesn't immediately fall down, because the cuff is keeping it, where it's supposed to be. So those two things, comfort, long sleeves with a cuff, and is that it? That's it. So I have 2 requirements. With those 2 requirements, I am almost never able to find a store-bought nightgown that I want. I own 2 nightgowns right now. I have a winter nightgown and a summer nightgown, and they both almost meet my requirements. My winter one has buttons, but they're right here in the middle and they're small, so I don't lay flat on that. But neither one of them have cuffs on the sleeves, so I don't love that. Anyway, so I thought it would be a good idea to make a nightgown, because then I can make it exactly how I want. This nightgown, it had a lot of steps. It had this yoke right here is 2 separate pieces, and then there's this piece that goes all the way to the floor. There's a separate back piece, and then the sleeves. And in the end, actually, so your first step is to sew the shoulder seams on the long back, and then these 2 little yoke pieces. So you do that, you put the neckline on, and then you sew this piece right here to the yoke. And then, so you've now got this long piece with a head hole in the middle. And then you sew, these sleeves are flat to begin with. So you sew that around, and then this is open at the bottom. And so your last step to kind of finish the nightgown is to sew a seam that goes from your wrist all the way down to the floor on each side. So very elegant, I thought. My favorite part of this, besides how comfortable it is that it has pockets. So guess who can wallow in her pajamas in the morning and throw her phone in her pocket? And I thought that was nice. So I actually ran out of this color fabric, so I used some of my gray paisley fabric that I had left over from my leggings. And the reason I chose this is because it's stretchy, it's definitely a knit fabric, but it's not so super stretchy that once you put something with a little weight, like a phone, in your pocket, that it's not going to go ooh and stretch really far. So that is my sewing adventures, and I think that's about it. So if you want any written instructions on how I do those t-shirts, you can check out the Trappings and Trinkets blog, www.trappingsandtrinkets.com. The date of that post was May 2nd. And there's a tutorial linked to that post that shows you the tutorial that I used to learn how to do a knit neckline. Well, actually, the tutorial shows you how to do it on a baby sleeve or something like that, but come on, you can figure it out. It's the exact same principle. She walks you through the baby sleeve, but you can put that exact same finish on any size opening. So check that out. I hope you enjoyed my sewing adventures. I know this is supposed to be a knitting podcast, but I've been doing so much sewing lately that it's really just turned into a sewing podcast. But I've been having fun with it, and there were quite a few projects that I wanted to finish. I wanted to finish them while the weather was still cool, but I didn't quite make that. But now I'm getting my summer t-shirt wardrobe all ready, so I can be a stylish person this summer. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my sewing adventures. Adios.